Yeah, yeah, and please send it to me.
Okay, it's
Okay.
recording. We're ready.
Uh, Hello, everyone. You are welcome. Please, colleagues, welcome Mr. Ray Landley and Mr. Jacob Frankum from Array Global Education Services, Inc. They have long, wide, and long experience in education. When I read something about your organization, I found that you have more than 100-year experience in education and 50 years in helping institutions in accreditations, policies, and other things, which is great and will be helpful to us. They are the board, still another Dr. Salam Noor, as I hope, sure. Dr. Salam Noor, they are the board of this organization, and they insisted and I thank you very much for your insistence and commitment. Since February 2020, you told me that you will came to Lebanon and make a workshop for us concerning academic accreditation. Since that, we have welcomed you. Then Corona, COVID-19, our Corona pandemic stops this workshop and other workshops. It stops the whole world. But your consistency, and thanks for Madame Nawal Shafi'i. She tried very hard uh, to communicate with you and help us to make this easy. And we are thanking you for making this helpful. And sure, I have to told all my colleagues that we have sent to you some questions concerning academic accreditation and other projects. As I told you before, we are these colleagues are some of them are members and the others are experts. We are working in 4 interrelated and interrelated consistent projects. The academic accreditation is one of them, but it is a huge umbrella that we can depend on it for the development of our projects and work, and also for the development of our schools and education. So we are so glad to see you, both of you, and you are welcome. Thank you for this presentation, and I hope your presentation will meet our fears or our questions, and will give us many answers.
Great, thank you very much. Just quick introductions of the two of us. I'm Dr. Ray Lindley. When I gave Akram the years of experience the other day, he quickly figured out my age. I just finished my 57th year as a professional educator. So add all that up and you can get to my age. So, but I believe that in the 57 years, hopefully I've picked up, and I don't know about some of you who have been in the business for a while, but sometimes I think that was a stupid mistake I made when I was a beginner. And I think we learn from these kinds of things. Briefly, obviously, I began the business as a high school teacher, and my special love was teaching speech, journalism, drama, English, and music. I've taught all of those subjects at the high school level. And so I have quite a background in the arts and so forth. After that, I went to the university, and I was able to get my doctorate. My doctorate is in counseling psychology, because my whole intent was that I was going to leave education and become a clinical psychologist. I finished I finished the training, and then all of these education jobs kept coming my way, and they said, would you? And so even though I did practice on a temporary basis, the last many years I've done just I've done just schoolwork, but I've been a school principal, very large high school, multicultural high school. I've been a school superintendent, and I've also, for 20 years, I worked with the government, with the state, and I had two major responsibilities, and both of those will be talked about today. One, I was very much a part of writing the state requirements for the legal requirements for schools. And so that's why when Akram told us that that was one of your interests, I feel that we hopefully have some background that I can help you do some things or help you figure out what it is you want to do. Also, please note that on our list of consultants, one of them that has already been mentioned is Dr. Salam Noor, who is our third board member. He was actually my boss at the Department of Education, and we worked together on the building of the legal requirements. And it's important for us to understand the difference between a legal requirement and an accreditation requirement. I often said, legally, you have to do this. Accreditation, you can do this and do it better. And that's really what we see as the difference between, and we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. Been working for the last 30 years now, specifically in accreditation, and have been all over the world working with international schools. I want to tell you a little bit about me, and Dr. Jake will do the same, and then we'll get into our presentation.
All right. Well, I'm Dr. Jacob Frankham, and I am a superintendent of schools in the state of Montana. Most beautiful place. If you hear about where movie stars go or where some of the movies are made, they're made, a lot of them, in the state of Montana. I think it probably has a lot of similarities with Lebanon in that there's mountains, a lot of trees, it's beautiful. And so, yeah, I'm glad to be here. I've been a superintendent now for about 10 years. And before, at the beginning of my educational career, I was a high school science teacher and taught for a number of years. I've been an administrator at a private school. I've been an administrator at a publicly owned government school, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm working as a superintendent with a wonderful school district that has a lot of poverty, but we have a lot of different challenges, as I'm sure that you face, in trying to provide the best education. I've been a principal for a number of years, a high school principal, an elementary principal. I'm also currently an adjunct professor, and I teach principals and superintendents in the region. And I noticed some of you did some research, and some of you downloaded my dissertation. Anytime my dissertation gets downloaded, I get an email. I think 3 or 4 in Lebanon the past 2 days that downloaded my dissertation, and did my research on character education, instilling the values and attributes that students need to be successful after they graduate. And I received 2 different awards for that research, and I was very proud of that, and love doing that kind of research, and love teaching university students also. So I've been working with Dr. Ray for probably close to 15 years in accreditation, and he and I have accredited schools. First, we started accrediting a lot of schools in the United States when we were working with an accrediting body. And then I've been able to travel with him and with others for the past almost decade, and visited many, many different countries, many schools. And I just find it such an enriching experience to visit schools and visit the people and students and see the wonderful things that are going on. So we hope to be able to give you some guidance and direction on what you want to do. As Akram told us the other day, I think curriculum hasn't been updated since 1997. And so we want to be able to support you and other ministries of education throughout the world in their efforts to provide a quality education, because we believe that we can not only influence the individual student in the school, but we can really influence the country, which in turn strengthens the entire world. So that's our vision, is really to strengthen and improve and change the world. So we're excited to be here, and we have a presentation. Again, it's in the chat box. If you can't see it, it's at the very top. If I need to repost it, I can do that too. So I will start by sharing my screen, if you're ready for that, Dr. Ray.
Yes, let's go ahead.
Welcome for both of you. But let me say something. Most of my colleagues are French educated,
Sure.
and and if you please, can use simple English words as I have mentioned before, and speak a little bit slower in order
Oh,
to catch up everything. Thank you a lot, and you can start. We are all waiting.
Great, thank you. Yes, we did talk about that the other day, and I was going to start by saying, if we speak too fast, or if there is something you don't understand, Dr. Jake, is there a way they can indicate that to repeat something?
yeah. They can unmute themselves and say something, or they can put something in the chat box.
Yeah, every one of my colleagues knows that. Please
Yep.
let me say something in Arabic for all colleagues. لو سمحتوا زملاء يعطيكم العافية جميعا. إذا حسيتوا في شيء سريع، إذا عندكم أسئلة فيكم تطرحوها من خلال الشات بوكس أو تبعتوا شيء مسج، أو إذا بدكم تبعتوا لي على الواتساب وأنا كمان برجع بترجمه وبسأله للدكتور، أو بعتوه على الجروب. حيلا حدا من الزملاء بترجمه بالانجلش وكمان بيسالوا للدكتور راي والدكتور جيكوب. شكرا لكم. Thanks. You can start your
Great.
presentation.
We have divided this presentation today into two parts, and then we will add a part at the end because we know that one of the things that you're interested in is working on the national standards, and we can give you some suggestions on that direction. So we title this Quality Education, Quality Schools. How does it happen, and what does it look like? So first of all, let's define the terms. So if we can go to the next slide, what do we mean by quality education and quality schools? Let's look at the definition of quality. I was talking with a person the other day in Iraq and trying to learn better English, and we were talking about how some words can have several meanings depending on how they're used. But here's what we want to think about when we're looking at quality. Is the standard a standard of something that's measured against something else of a similar kind? It's the degree of excellence of something. That's the basic understanding of quality. So with that in our minds, let's look at what is the real definition we're looking for. I think all of us will say that we want to have quality in our work. We want to be recognized for a standard that is looked at with quality. Maybe another way we could look at it is it's a distinctive attribute, a distinctive something about something else, makes it stand out. Or it could be just the whole idea of a degree of excellence. Is there a degree to quality? Is there, can you put it on a scale and say 1 is quality, but it's a low quality, and 5 is quality, but it's a very high quality? So as we look at that, let's think of quality as something that grows. Many times we use words as both a noun and a verb.
Yeah.
I think that typically we use the word quality as saying it's there. That's a noun. It is something that is. But I'm encouraging us to look at quality also as a process. And when we talk about accreditation later, we're going to talk about the process that you go through in there. So we're looking at quality in both cases. It's something that is, and it's something that you are in the process of doing. I often say that if we think that quality is reaching a certain standard, and then once we get there, the there is it. But I suggest that once we get there, the there has moved up. So there's more to it than just the basic understanding of quality.
Mm-hmm.
Then we say at a school, well, I don't have to really talk much about the fact that our whole concept of school has changed in the last few months because of the coronavirus. you see in front of you a building. We typically think of that as a school. However, every country we're dealing with and every state in the United States has had to deal with a broader definition of school. If we say it's an institution of learning, is it only in an institution? We have to broaden our whole concept of school in that school happens more than just in a building. And if we don't understand that in today's world, we're doing our students a big disfavor by not helping them understand that learning happens outside of school. It is, again, an institution, but not a building. It is a concept, a process. So how do you define a quality school? Well, we're suggesting several things here that you can look at. And please understand, with Dr. Jake and myself, we're looking at the quality school in general. And this is going to be whether it's accredited or not accredited. Akram had told us the other day that many of you are French educated, and many of you have a background in a French system of schooling, if you will. And one of the things that we'll talk about later that we feel we're very privileged that we are able to do is to work with all kinds of institutions, not just American or international. For instance, we have some schools we're working with that are totally French speaking. Now we can go in and our French is certainly not up to the par of the school, but with proper interpreters with us, we can look at that school and say, whether it's taught in French or Arabic or German or any other language, we can look at quality and say, is it meeting the quality? So when we're talking about a quality school, we're not just talking about, does it have to meet the American or the international standards? We have many schools that are based on the British system, and their whole process, for those of you who have worked in it, their whole process is much different. It's very much a point by point by point by point examination. And that's fine, and we can work with that. We have to know. So Dr. Jake, is there anything else on the quality that we wanted to say before we go into our list?
Well, I think when we talk about quality, it's a school or institution that stands out, much like this golden apple. They meet that quality that has been established. And when they meet that quality, they not only stand out to the government, but to parents and to students, and it's something that is sought after. And so we wanted to talk about several different items of what makes up a quality school. And the first one is about students, because we know that students are the most important aspect of a school. And everything that we do should be focused on improving student achievement. So when we're talking about students and a quality school, students are deeply involved. They're very involved with their work, and especially with academic and teacher-led instruction.
And when I was first high school principal, I was principal of a very large high school. When I was very young, I had just finished my doctorate, and it was one of those jobs that came to me, and I said, well, I better give this a try. I'll never forget that one of the salesmen, because you probably always get salespeople who come in and want to sell things to you, diplomas, high school graduation gowns, and all that kind of stuff. He came into my school and he said something I have never forgotten. He said, I can walk into a school and in 15 minutes, I can tell you a lot about that school. And I at first said, oh no, that's not possible. But over the years that we've been working in schools, hundreds of schools, I have found out that I can. You can walk into a school and in 10 minutes, I can tell you a whole bunch of stuff about that school without even talking with anybody. Just being in the school and seeing the atmosphere. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Is one of the indicators is students are deeply involved with their work. And that's one of the things that defines quality, is what do we see the students are doing? And is there a good feeling? Is the school clean, etc. We can go over many things, but we can in 10 minutes tell you a lot about the school.
We have to make sure that everything that we do is directed at improving student performance. So when we are building a swimming pool or a gymnasium, that we're focused on the student performance. How is that going to help students perform better? And like Dr. Ray was saying, when you walk into a school, you can feel a school culture almost immediately. And so that's something that we can feel right away. The next part is students know what is expected of them, and they're generally successful. Just like anyone who in your job, we want to know what our responsibilities are, and we need to make sure that we're communicating that to students and that we're doing all that we can as educators to help them be successful.
And that's that's really a thing that you can view and measure. Do students really know? When I was doing teacher evaluations when I was principal, I found that those classrooms where the students were making the best progress is they knew exactly what it was that was expected of them. So many times we have a general idea of what we're doing and what we're saying. I remember the story of Sir Christopher Wren. I don't know if you heard this story, but one day, he was the famous architect who built many cathedrals, so one day he decided he would, in disguise, just walk among the workers who were working on his cathedral. And so he went up to one person and he said, "Sir, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm laying these bricks one by one and I put the mortar here." And the other, I went to somebody else and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm doing a structure of the size of the facility, and I'm looking at all of the particulars of what needs to be done here." And he walked up to the third guy and he said, "Sir, what are you doing?" He said, "Sir, I am helping Sir Christopher Wren build a beautiful cathedral." And that to me really, really emphasizes if students really know what it is that they're expected to do and they see the goal of what they're trying to do. So generally, they're much more successful if they have a clear understanding of what it is they're supposed to be doing.
And then the next is that there's little wasted time, confusion, or disruption. And that's some of the easy things to do in a school to make sure that that everything is operating well, everything is operating like a machine. I went into a school my first year as a high school principal, brand new as a high school principal, and I could see a lot of little things that were just a wasted time. Classes would start and teachers would sit down and take roll, and we changed a lot of those things so every single minute in the classroom was utilized, and the teachers were teaching bell to bell. Students came in and there was something up on the board that they immediately started to do. At the end of the period, there was an exit process. There was an assignment that they would have to do. So every single minute that we had was utilized. And just by doing those simple things, we found that we had some major improvements in student performance, because research shows is the biggest impact on student performance is the amount of time that they're in the school. And when we maximize our time in the school, we're gonna have better student performance. And it's a simple thing that as we look at that, can make such drastic improvements.
I'm a disciple of an educational theorist called Dr. Madeline Hunter. And she's an old timer. And she's been around a long time. In fact, I think she's dead now. But she developed a system called Instructional Theory into Practice, ITIP. You might look it up. And what she did, she was head of the graduate school at UCLA in California. And she had 600 graduate students. And she sent them throughout the United States. And they were told to go into a school and tell the principal, "I want to view your very best teachers." And that's where a lot of the ITIP theories came into play, is from looking the 600 students. So when they got back together under her supervision, they developed this system. And it reminds me of a situation where I was asked in another country. The superintendent of the school asked if I would do a workshop, said the teachers needed some training to help the students behave better. They felt the students were unruly. Well, I generally have a feeling it's not a student problem, it's a teacher problem. And so it happened to be after school for 2 days in a row, 2 hours each day. And the first day when the teachers came in, I had written on the board in front of me several rules for the class. Here's what we're going to do today. And I said, before class begins today, would you please write a short essay on the following topic? Okay, so I'm coming in, and here's this stranger from America, and these are teachers from another country. And so I start on time and I say, okay, so you all saw everything I have written up here. Did any of you do the assignment? And they look, oh, that's us? I said, well, yes, it says teachers before class begins today. Oh, first lesson, put something so that students know what is expected and they don't waste time. So we went through the whole day, 2 hours, and we went through several concepts and we talked about several things. The second day, on purpose, I was not in there at the starting time. I was in the superintendent's office hiding. And I walked in 10 minutes late. I had an assignment on the board. When I came in, all the teachers were busily working on the assignment. And I stood at the back of the room and I clapped and I said, after 1 day, you have learned this is what you're supposed to do when you come to class. And I said, if teachers can learn that, imagine how well students can learn that. So that's why I want to emphasize there's little waste of time. How much time do we spend saying, Akram, are you here today? Dr. Jake, are you here today? Madeline, are you here today? And we go on. Hey, that can be done silently. We need students engaged all the time in class. They feel that they're really on target.
All right, next is something that we've talked about a little bit already, is the climate of the school. The climate of the school is work-oriented, but relaxed and pleasant. I think, yeah, we talked about this, is when you go into a school, you can kind of feel what the school, what kind of climate it has right away. If it's clean, if it's organized, if someone is there to welcome you. In my school, I have students there at the very beginning of every day where they're welcoming all the students who are coming, all the staff members, giving them a high five. Nowadays, it's a fist bump, or just giving them a smile, so we can start the day off with a very, very positive climate. But I also like this part where we have a positive climate, but it's focused on work. It's focused on learning. And I think that's so important as educators to establish that climate and make sure that that is one of the forefronts of our mind, because none of us can work in a climate that we feel unsafe in, physically or emotionally. We all want to feel like we're part of a team and that we're making progress. The fifth one is that teachers come to class ready to teach, but they're mindful of the fact that not all students come to class ready to learn. Dr. Ray, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a fun one. That's a fun one because we often think that students need to be motivated or challenged. I've often said you can't teach much of anything, but what you can do is create in students the desire to learn. That's really what the effective classroom looks like. Again, when I was principal, I often said that I could take the head of my English department, the chair of the English department, and put him in a chemistry classroom. And he doesn't know a lot about chemistry, but he knows how to motivate students. And so he could do a fairly good job without knowing all the details of chemistry, because he knows how to motivate students to want to learn. And there are many, many ways that we can encourage students to learn and to make them want to learn. We have to find out where they are. In today's world, we know, and we're going to talk about it later, we know that we live in a digital world. And yet in some schools, we go and say, can't use your cell phones, can't use your computers, can't use your iPads. And that's what they're used to. So we have to find a way to motivate them to use these tools so that it meets their needs. It's a whole different world than we had 20 years ago, and definitely a whole different world than we had 20 years before that. Who would have thought that we're going to have to spend all of our time in distance education trying to keep our instruction going? But if we help students want to motivate to learn, we notice that that is the quality of a good school.
Wow.
One of the main qualities of a good school is making sure that you have a strong curriculum. If you don't have a good roadmap of where you want to go, you're not going to be able to get there. And the curriculum provides that roadmap. And one part about this slide that we specifically wanted to talk about is that the curriculum is flexible. That you can teach students who are high performing, that do very, very well. You can meet their needs, but then also there's the curriculum that you can support students who need a little bit extra support and help. That we call this differentiation, where you can help students at any level that they need to, because our focus and our goal as educators is to help all students be successful and meet their potential. But we know all of us, or many of us, have probably been in a classroom with 20 or 30 students on the same level. But we, as a teacher, this is what makes teaching so fun and education so fun, is the challenge to help all students learn and grow at their different levels.
I've noticed, excuse me, some of you are taking notes. I want you to know that this is being recorded so that you will have access to it. So if you're busy taking notes and you don't want to, that's fine. You'll have all of this available. I want to say something about this slide.
We are used to take notes.
Oh, they're good students.
Thank you.
I want to say something about this slide and the curriculum. We really talk a lot about a term called scope and sequence. If that's a new term to you, let me define it.
No, we know.
You know,
we know it very. It is very clear for us.
Yeah,
Scope and sequence.
Grade 12, here's what we expect all students to know about these subjects and the sequence. And as I was telling with Dr. Akram the other day, we need to think forward and design backwards. If we expect students to know this at the end of grade 12, what do we expect them to know at the end of grade 11 to get ready for grade 12, 10 for 11, and all the way back? And see what we can do then, if we really have that understood. Even the kindergarten or the preschool teacher, when they first start learning the alphabet and so forth, knows eventually what this is leading towards. Many times, one of the things that we hear from students is, I'm not going to be a mathematician. I don't have to know this math. But if we've done a good job of explaining why at the end this is going to be important, we can really help them get motivated. So a student comes into the 4th grade class and the teacher knows what should have happened in 3rd grade. And if she finds students who aren't there, she knows what to pick them up. And the other part of it is she knows what's going to happen in 5th grade. So if a student is beyond what that 4th grade is, she knows how to motivate that student to go beyond what we're doing now. Dr. Jake mentioned it, but I'm telling you, it's a very, very difficult job to be a teacher. We have another presentation we do, and all the roles that teachers have to do. Sometimes we have to be parents, we have to be counselors, we have to be safe harbor. We have to be so many things to be a teacher, but I believe it's a high calling, and I am so appreciative of anybody who gets into this business and says, I want to challenge the learners that I have.
And the next one is also about curriculum, and it's focusing on making sure that the curriculum is ensuring student success. And I think as a ministry, as a school, as an educator, the biggest thing that we talk about is success? What is success for each one of our students? And then also the emphasis of the curriculum is on authentic learning for students. And that's something that if we were in a face-to-face workshop, we talk about what does authentic learning mean and how do we get that for each one of our students?
Yes, and there's another word that I would encourage us, in this particular sentence, success is used as a noun. Let's think of it as a verb. Something you keep doing. You never get there, because when you get there, the there changes. So let's think about success as a growing thing. It's not just getting a 1600 on the SAT score. That's a measure of success, but it's not all of the success that the student will feel.
And then when we talk about curriculum, we're not just talking about the students learning their times tables or how to write a 5-paragraph essay or how to write a paragraph. One of the most important things that students can learn is character. Learn how to work hard, learn how to be responsible, learn how to treat others with kindness. So it's a lot more than just learning information and facts. And I think this is why many of us get into education, is because we want to build relationships with students. And when we build those relationships with students, we're teaching them much more about mathematics or language arts or social studies. We're teaching them how to be better, responsible human beings. So we're really working closely with the parents to provide help a student develop their character.
Yeah, character development is in itself a big subject. And sometimes we forget it. If you want to read something about character development, let me give you something to look up on the internet. It's a story, and it's called Mrs. Thompson, Thompson, and Teddy, Teddy Stoddard, Stoddard, or you can just do a search for Teddy Stoddard. And I promise you.
Can you repeat? Sorry, Teddy.
Yes, look it up for Teddy, Teddy, Stoddard, Stoddard. And I often have used this in workshops, and to this day, I never read this story in a workshop without getting misty-eyed at the end.
Wow.
Because it is all about taking a student for who he is. And I'll tell you, when Mrs. Thompson first meets him, he's not a student that anybody wants to have around. But anyway, if you will, I promise you, if you need something just to make you tear up a little bit, get tears in your eyes, read Mrs. Thompson and Teddy Stoddard. I think the search, if you just do Teddy Stoddard, Dr. Jake just wrote it there, Teddy Stoddard. I promise you, you will thank me, because that really inspires you to help students develop character.
The next thing is something that we've already kind of talked about. The scope and sequence that Dr. Ray was talking about. Go ahead, Dr. Ray.
Well, yes, it's that, but it's also what happens after the student leaves your school, assuming at the end of grade 12 or graduation. Too many times we don't think enough about what those students are preparing to do. Unfortunately, in many schools, because of parent emphasis or because they think that's what they're expected, they say, oh, I'm going to go to the university. I'm going to become an engineer. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to become an attorney. I'm going to do, and I think part of that is because we kind of lay that expectation on them. But check the statistics. For instance, when I was principal, I always I had the high school graduates, I had about 600 or 700 every year. I always had them fill out a card to say, what are you going to do next year? 80% of them said, I'm going to college. And yet all we had to do was a follow-up the year later, and only about 45 to 50% went to college. And of those, only about 40% were graduated from college. So I think we're unrealistic if we don't think of many options for students after high school. And we need to understand that every job, every career is honorable. I have a man coming out to my home Friday to check the air conditioning in our home. I couldn't begin to check the air conditioning in my home, but I do appreciate his knowledge, and he's very highly trained as an air conditioning repair person. So we need to think that we have to prepare them and not put them down. Unfortunately, in many cases, parents are the ones who make this decision, saying, well, my son is going to be this, or my daughter is going to be this. And yet that's not really what the child wants. So we need to think about preparing them for a big world out there that has many options.
And many of you have probably seen the research that most of our students, 60% of our students, are going to be doing jobs that aren't even created yet. And so we really need to have that vision for the future on what the job market is going to be, what the global environment is going to be. And I think that's why it's so important as a ministry or as administrators and leaders in your country about coming up with that vision on what's going to happen next for your students. Another thing is, and we've kind of all learned this very, very quickly in the last few months, is a quality school must recognize the importance and use of e-learning. And we've gotten so good at e-learning. Dr. Ray and I did a similar presentation just in February before the coronavirus really hit. And we were talking about e-learning, and we talked about the importance of it. And now we're really, really seeing how important it really is for students and teachers to be comfortable with e-learning, because it's right.
Thank you.
Now.
Thank you for this one. Thank you.
Yes, and we can do both. We can do both. We can do in-house teaching and learning, but we need to. And one of the issues that I find is that, you know, your students, they're probably, when they leave school, they're on an iPad, a cell phone, a computer, or whatever, because that's the world they know it. And we use the term digital native. For instance, I understand that some of you are French, some of you are Lebanese, some of you are other. So Dr. Jake and I are American. We're American natives, meaning this is where we started, this is where we grew up. But the students you face today are all digital natives. Sometimes when I need to know something other than asking Dr. Jake, I need to know something about my computer, I call one of my grandsons and say, hey, can you help me figure this out? Because that's all they've ever known is the digital world. And if we don't recognize that, we're not reaching them at a level. But I do believe that what we need to do is help them understand that not everything you find on the internet is true. And we need to help them be discerning listeners on what they find on the internet. And so that's another challenge that we have with e-learning.
And I think with this coronavirus, we're going to be seeing a lot more e-learning take place. And if I was in your shoes as a minister of Ministry of Education, and currently in my shoes as a superintendent of schools, our focus right now is really doing a lot of e-learning training for teachers, our parents, and our students. We've learned so much on how to provide a pretty good education. It's going to get better as we're forced to move into the fall on this. But I think one question that you really wanted us to focus on is how is COVID-19 really going to affect education for the next year, 5 years, 10 years? And this is what's going to change education the most, is the e-learning component. Teachers really utilizing technology a lot more and using what students are really interested in, the technology component.
I just saw Tasama put on the screen a thing for iTip. I promise you, this is old stuff. And you know, it's kind of like, if you remember in the early 1900s, Thomas Dewey was one of the early, I wasn't here then, I promise.
Mrs. Tasama is the teacher task force.
What's that?
She's the teacher task force, Mrs. Tasama.
Yeah, but anyway, there's some great things. Not everything will apply to you, but there's great ideas in there. And see how easy that was? In two cases here, Dr. Jake was able to put on the Teddy Stoddard name, and this Sama, I hope I'm saying that correctly, just put on the search for iTip. Wow, imagine what this does to students if teachers are using this kind of learning. And so, when you're in class, how you want to know more? Boom, 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 go here. And this is going to help. E-learning can be a very valuable tool. Thank you, Tosama, for doing that, because it's just an indication of what we're talking about.
The next part is stakeholders and how important they are in being involved in the educational process. And we always tell schools to utilize as many stakeholders as they can in their decision making. If they're developing or reviewing their mission statement, they like to get stakeholders involved. And I should define what a stakeholder is. It's anyone who's associated with the school, from administration and owners to teachers and support staff, parents, students, community members. As a Ministry of Education, you're also a stakeholder in that part. And so when students are going through the process, when they're reviewing curriculum, when they're buying instructional materials, when they're looking at doing a facility expansion, we encourage schools to get the stakeholders involved, because when they're involved, it creates buy-in. They appreciate having that involvement in that process, because they're part of the educational process.
And both of us having been administrators and superintendents, we know that sometimes those stakeholders are not nice to us. But we have to learn to accept what they say. And sometimes getting them involved, helping them understand what you're doing can turn a person overnight. And remember that the administration of the school, or in this case, let's say in Lebanon, you are going to develop these standards for schools. You're the final authority. It doesn't mean that because somebody thinks that you ought to have a day where everybody comes to school dressed in their pajamas. Doesn't mean you're going to do that because a stakeholder suggested that. It means you listen to it. And if you've practiced this business of listening, and I have found when I was a school administrator, and even at the Department of Education when I worked there, sometimes the person who is the most angry is the one who can help me see things in a way that I had not thought about before. And by the way, students are on this, because sometimes students, I was in a school once, it was here in the United States. I was doing a visit to work on the state standards, and on their committee, they had a 6th grade student who was on their committee. And we were about halfway through, and he said, "Excuse me, I have to excuse myself. I'm the SIST nav for the high school program, and I need to go help them." 6th grade student, system navigator is what he was for the high school online program. And he had to be, he needed to leave to go help them. Imagine how that kid felt. All of a sudden, everything makes more sense to him. And I was so impressed. I mean, this kid knows more about systems navigation than I'll probably ever know. But students sometimes can give us wonderful input into who we are and what we're doing.
And I would probably echo that thought as the ministry's updating any of their items, if they're updating curriculum or their standards of quality. If you get your stakeholders involved, the people of your country and administration of schools and staff members, maybe some parents, and when you're evaluating those different components as a ministry, you'll get some wonderful feedback. Doesn't mean that you have to follow everything that they say, but it will start a dialogue, and they will have that buy-in to that process.
Yeah, let me add something else in here. I was in a school in another country, and here's another suggestion you might want to consider. A program called The Leader in Me. The Leader in Me, by Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits, The 8 Habits. Have any of your schools used that? So I walked into this school. It was a school that was only through 6th grade. And so I met at the door by 2 5th grade students, 2 young boys. And standing behind them were the teachers. And so I walk into the school, somebody was with me, and we walk in, "Good morning, sir. We would like to welcome you to our school." These are the students talking. And we practice a system called the leader in me. And I will give you the first 5 concepts. And then my colleague, he's talking about a 5th grade student, will tell you the next ones. And so he goes through the leader in me, here's what we do here, 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 here. And then he said, now my colleague will share with you. His colleague, 5th grade student. And so then we go into classes, and I visited, I believe, 8 classes. And of the 8 classes, 5 of them were being led by a student, 5th or 6th grade student. And the teacher was there observing what was going on, could have fixed anything that needed fixing, but the student was going through the lesson, and they had an exam the day before, and he would say, he would call on the student and say, what did you put for answer number 7? Okay, how many of you agree with that? And here's the teacher standing there observing everything. He's not out of a job. And so it leads me to believe this, and I'm sorry, I just really believe in student involvement. But the best teacher, here's another phrase for you. I have a lot of phrases. The best teacher is a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. Got it? Guiding students.
Repeat it again.
A guide on the side, not a sage or smart person on the stage. Best teaching, students are being helped. And I didn't see how their results were at the end of that year that I was there. It was 2 years ago. But my guess is those students were all learning at a high level. A teacher's guide on the side. Not a sage on the stage. Exactly. And one of the difficult things that I think people from the government, the ministry, and so forth have when they go into schools, if they're looking at all the legal requirements, which you have to, but these are the kinds of things that we can help schools do to really make them pass the legal requirements, but really assure the students are learning.
And the last component we feel is that school improvement is not a technological fix. There's not just one thing that the school can do and it's going to be perfect. Or if they give Chromebooks or tablets to every single student, that's going to fix it and the school is going to be improved. When you look at school improvement, it's a holistic approach. There's many different facets and many different people that need to be involved in that process to help that school improve. And schools are continually improving. They never stop improving. And we need to always be looking at ways that we can provide improvement, because as we were saying a little bit earlier, our society and the world is constantly changing. So we need to be continually changing as a school or as a ministry or as administration to best provide the best education that we can for each one of the students.
And we're going to be getting into the whole accreditation issue here in just a second, but it's important on this technological fix to understand the difference between a goal and a strategy. Okay? All goals for school improvement should be written in terms of student improvement. Now, if you want to provide Chromebooks for all of your students, that's not a goal, that's a strategy. So often I will go into a school and we'll go over their school improvement plan, and they will have something like, we're going to build a new gymnasium. I say, fine, why? Well, because our old one is, it's decrepit, and so, okay, so why? Why do you need a new, and I keep saying why, until we finally get them to say, because students will be more physically fit. Or we can go to an English class or a social studies or a science or whatever. And every goal should be written in terms of student improvement. If we remember, a strategy is something to reach a goal. And that's where the technological fix comes in. We think, okay, we're getting Chromebooks for all of our students. Now we're there. But the goal is not to get the books.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
The next is probably one of my favorite slides, because we're trying to figure out who's the most important, who we focused on, who should be at the top of this school pyramid, and who helps this process take place. So we have parents, we have students, We have accreditation in governments, administrators. The most important is supposed to be here on the top. And often when we've talked about this with other people and done this and have looked at this in presentations, it's hard for them to figure out what is the most important component, because sometimes teachers, people say that schools, the teachers are most important because they do so much, or administrators because they oversee all the teachers and the students and the parents, or accreditation in governments, that they're the most important. So this is what it looks like.
Yeah, and I often say, you know, and here it is, the top of the pyramid is the student. And, you know, when I was principal, I had about 125 teachers in my school, and the first faculty meeting of the year, I always said the same thing. Remember, these walls were not built so we can have a job. They were built for students. And look here down at the bottom. This is Dr. Jake and me, and it's all of you. We're at the bottom, and everything moves up to the fact that we're doing this to help administrators. Administrators are doing what they can to help teachers. Teachers are doing what they can to help parents. Parents are doing what they can to help students. And if we really understand that, I will say something, and it's a very prejudicial statement, but one of the reasons why at Array Global we exist is because too many schools where we go in, it's a matter of a checklist. Did you do this? Did you do this? Boom, boom, check, check, check. Another country where we go to, the government has a checklist. You do it, you do it, you do it, you do it. Okay, you're fine. Without really looking at what are we doing to move up that pyramid to get to the students.
And I was just recently listening to a podcast, a leadership podcast yesterday. And they were talking about how to build trust as a leader. And one of the people on the podcast said, the best way to build trust is to ask one simple question: how can I help you? And as you look at that in our position as accreditation and governments, if we say to administrators, how can we help you? Or if administrators say, how can we help you, teachers? We're going to be able to have such a huge impact on our students that we're really trying to focus on.
I heard, I was at a convention once, and Dr. Benjamin Hooks, who used to be head of the NAACP, the National Association for Colored People. Anyway, he was giving a speech, and he said, you know, the definition of being a leader is very easy. A leader is simply a person who has followers. If you think you're leading and you have no followers, you're merely taking a walk. Now think about that. If we really believe that moving up this pyramid, that the accreditation and governments and all the way up, that we're helping people follow our inspiration or our guidelines, we're doing our job. But it's a leader is simply a person who has followers, who he thinketh he leadeth and hath no followers, is merely taking a walk. And I probably won't have to tell you very much about especially what's going on in the United States right now, as far as people who think they're leading a cause, but they don't have the followers. And by the way, the riots, the demonstrations are not happening all over the United States. I get some of my friends in the other part of the world who write to say, are you safe? Is everything okay? And I say, yeah, I'm fine. These are happening in a few spots, but it's not the whole United States. Just had to say that.
The next is defining what accreditation is. And in some of the countries that we go into, ministries and schools don't quite understand what accreditation is and what role it plays to ensure quality education for each one of the students. So let me just briefly read this. Accreditation is the recognition that an institution maintains standards requisite for its graduates to gain admission to other reputable institutions of higher learning. Dr. Ray, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, because it's a recognition that an institution maintains standards. Again, I will differentiate between what you're going to have to do as the Lebanese government, and if your schools enter into the accreditation process. See, a standard is something that you have to meet. And when you're working for the government, you have every right because of the government regulation, perhaps funding is part of that and so forth. You have a right to go in and say, yes, 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 they're doing it. But that doesn't mean that it's maintaining standards of quality. It means you're doing the legal requirement. And as I said, when I worked for the government, I wore both hats. In one case, I had to go and say, yes, 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 because that's a matter of the governmental funds coming to the school. So they had to meet certain standards. And I'm guessing that you're going to have to do that as the Lebanese government in your schools if you're not doing that already. But accreditation is a step. I often say this, government standards are if you are doing it. Accreditation is how well are you doing it. That's kind of the difference that I see.
And Dr. Ray kind of talked about this already. What is the goal of accreditation? It's to ensure that education provided by institutions meets acceptable levels of quality. And often when we go into schools, we want to make sure that the students meet that minimum standard. And if they don't, we can't accredit them. More often than not, though, when we go into a school, schools are meeting a much higher quality of standard. And that's what we really like to see, because again, it goes back to the students. They're providing a quality education for each one of those students to meet their potentials. Dr. Ray, do you want to talk about?
Yes, one of the issues that we run into in other countries is we have schools that, at least before we work with them, believe that if you're accredited by us or any other organization, that your student diploma, student graduation, automatically qualifies that student to get into a college or university in the United States. That's not true. Now, the U.S. Department of Education, this is their statement. They don't have the authority to accredit any public or private or secondary school, and the department does not recognize accrediting bodies for this accreditation. Now, if you go on the U.S. Department of Education website, you will see some of our competitors listed there, the regionals, the Regional Accrediting Association, but they make it very clear they're not on there because of their K through 12 work. They're on there because of the colleges and universities that they accredit. And we always have to make this very clear up front. Our accreditation, but a lot of people who don't really look at this definition think, oh, our school is accredited by, and then they'll say, and it's on the list here. But then that doesn't, but a lot of colleges don't understand that. And I never ever want people to think that accreditation with Array automatically qualifies that. Now, we do have some countries that we work with where the Array accreditation qualifies for schools in that country because the colleges have looked at the standards and excuse me, and they know that this meets it. And so if you're accredited and you got the stamp on there, that's admissible to the college, but it does not automatically. We've had some issues with some schools in Britain because of that same issue, and we do our best to explain this, but accreditation is really a quality process. Accreditation is not just a plaque on the wall. Oh, we did it. No, it's a process. And if you really want to be accredited, it's a continual process. We help schools understand that a school improvement plan or a student improvement plan is circular. It keeps changing. Think about, those of you who have been around for 20 years, think about the level of students you had 20 years ago compared to the students we have today. What are their interests? What are their needs? What do they want to do? It's a different world, so it has to be ever changing. And in accreditation, we help you see this process.
And part of and I think we're going to get this a little bit later, part of what our mission and vision is that when a school does get accredited, we don't just say, okay, you're accredited for 5 years and say, halas, we're not coming back, right? You're done. We want to be part of that process. We want to build that relationship and we want to be part of it. And these are the 5 different standards that we have in place to ensure a school is providing a quality education. And Dr. Ray and I have written standards several different times, and this is kind of the culmination, and we're very, very proud of how we have this organized and set up. And you'll find as you look at other accrediting bodies, they have very similar accreditation standards. I think the difference is with ours, as Dr. Ray and I have worked with many, many different international schools and understand how other countries work and people who are working with English in a second language. I actually have a master's degree in Russian, so I've lived in Russia. I understand working with people in a second language. And so we've developed these to be understandable. They still have a high quality, but they're understandable for people who are working in a second or third or fourth language, like many of you are. So the first one is a curricular program. We've talked a lot about curriculum already. An instructional program, and we have specific standards of what we want to see when we go into a classroom. Structure and support system. We specifically look at what systems are in place to make sure that everything is going to happen well to provide a good instructional and curricular program. The support staff that are in place. Standard 4 is finance and facilities. Those are all the support items that make sure that a school is operating. And then last, like Dr. Ray was just talking about, accreditation is not a one-time moment. It's a process. We want to see that continuous improvement, but not only see a continuous improvement, but we want to see a culture of continuous improvement. And when we talk about culture, it means that we see the stakeholders involved. We have parents involved. We have students involved. We have administration involved. It's not just administration and maybe some teachers coming up with an improvement plan. It's many people who buy into this plan, approve of it, and want to start implementing this improvement plan collectively, all together.
Yeah, I'm going to, if I come to Lebanon, I want to meet Osama. She, I believe, or he, I'm not sure. She put a comment on here. So the standards keep changing? No. Basic standards don't change. How we view them and how we operate them, they're going to be pretty consistent if the standards are more than just a checklist.
Sorry, Dr. Ray. I wasn't talking about these standards. Are they changing or not? I'm talking about the items under the standards.
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, so because you're talking about something that is continuously changing and the process, you talked about the process. So maybe also some items under the standards should be changing also, right?
Yes, I'll give you an example. When I first started working in accreditation, and it was when I was a high school principal, and I was the receiving end of the accreditation visit. At that time, there was a standard or the interpretation of a standard that every library had to, if you had so many students, you had to have this many volumes in your library, and so many more students, you had this many more volumes, and so forth. And so we, at the time, because that was where we were in this world, a library was a room full of books. Well, I don't even like to use the word library anymore. I like the term media center. Yes, there are books in there, and we need to help kids understand. But that's an example of how, we're still believing in the concept of research and materials and reading, but we don't look at it as a room full of books anymore. We look at it as the variety of access materials that we have for students. So I think that's according to what you were just saying, Tosama, is that the idea of having the materials didn't change. But the idea of what's available and how we're using those materials, we look at it in a different way.
And Dr. Ray, she had another great question on who sets these standards.
Oh, well, if we go with our pyramid concept that we talked about, we're going to start at the bottom if we know what's at the top. So as Dr. Jake said, we have been involved in accreditation together for many years. And when we put these 5 standards together, we were able to use the experience, the knowledge, and so forth that we've had over several years. And so we were able to try these out. And what we did when we got our first, second, and third drafts of these standards, we sent them to current educators to say, is this really realistic on what we need today? And so I've often said that if you're looking at curriculum, don't discount the fact that you've got some pretty highly qualified people in your community. In some cases, college professor. I've been a college professor, and I've been a college vice president, and I can tell you that the higher the level you go in college or university, the more narrow-minded I think you become sometimes about your subject area. But I believe that college-educated or college professors in their specialty have input. But I believe that some of your best input will come from if your teachers are doing the job that they should be doing. And yes, they're going to base it on research. They're going to base it on talking with people who know something about the field. Important to also talk with people who are working in that field at the time. For instance, one of the best ways to help students understand concepts in biology, perhaps, is to bring a medical doctor in and say, okay, what are some areas that we do? And I believe in research that we need to look at our graduates who go on to the university and ask them the question, what did you miss that we taught at this school that you're now finding out that we need to incorporate in our curriculum? So it's all of these things. It's research. It's talking with professionals in the field. It's talking with people who are highly educated in that. It's talking with teachers who are currently working in that situation. It's a whole conglomeration of things. And I promise you that when we finally settled on the exact wording of these 5 standards, it was only after we had run this by many people in the kind of the area. And yes, it's a lot of research.
And so the process of accreditation through Array Global is, first part is schools will go through a provisional accreditation process. And this is the very beginning of the formal accreditation process with Array. We come in for a day and work with the school, evaluate their items that they have. We visit classrooms, we interview students, we interview parents, we interview administration, and we want to make sure that they're meeting at least the minimum standards of quality that we have in place. And also a big part of that visit that we do is we talk to them about the accreditation process, the school improvement process, and how to prepare for the full accreditation. And
okay.
After they've gone through that provisional accreditation, they're accredited for 1 year. And they have that 1 year to work with us, work with our colleagues in getting ready for the full accreditation visit. And the full accreditation visit is wonderful. We come in for 2 or 3 days and we work with the school and going through all of their items of evidence. It's very, very thorough. We look at all the facilities, we visit a lot of classrooms, we interview a lot of people. So we're doing a very thorough job of researching everything associated with that school to make sure that they're meeting our standards and we're able to best support them in their improvement process. But before they go through the full accreditation, they do what we call a self-study. They go through each one of our standards and their indicators, and they rate themselves on each one of those standards and indicators. And they have to explain why they rated themselves that way. And they also have to provide items of evidence to show why they gave themselves that rating. So when we come in, we're looking at all those items of evidence. We call it a portfolio, a school portfolio. And then we look at their ratings and we put their ratings right next to our ratings. So in the final report, we can see if they did that self-study appropriately, if they were honest with themselves. So we're the external part of the evaluation process. They do an internal process, we do the external process. Because if they're knowing what issues they have that they need to improve on, it's going to be more effective for their school improvement process.
And let me say here too, because I know we're talking with people who work in the government area, we welcome any of the government staff members or so forth to be with us on the accreditation visit. We want you to see what's going on, and the difference between meeting a law and working towards improvement. So that's important. We usually try to, in a country, have a team of 4 to 5 people, 2 from the U.S. who are trained in our processes, and 2 from the country where we are, so that because rarely do you go into a school that you don't learn something. And so we have things to offer each other within a country.
All right, we're going to be moving through this a little bit faster so we can get to some of your questions. The full accreditation is 5 years. Again, we try to work with the school throughout that time. It's not that we're done after that full accreditation. We want to keep that relationship alive. We provide a lot of other services too. Hopefully you can check out our website. I'll put it in the chat here in just a minute. Our first and foremost kind of capstone is accreditation. We provide certification. And the one part of certification that a lot of schools find interesting is that we do STEAM and STEM certification for schools, which is a huge push right now in our logically growing world. So we not only certify schools, but we also help them get prepared to be a STEM program. We do a lot of consulting at any phase of the school. If they're new, if they're not even open, all the way if they've been going on for 20 years at any different level or at any different topic they need us to focus on.
And let me say on consulting too, we have on our website, you'll find, I think it's 13 or 14 consultants we have listed there with their photos and their background. And Dr. Jake and I are doing an interview with each of these consultants right now. You can find them on our Facebook page. We'll be posting the second one today. And so what we're doing with each of these consultants is having them give a little bit about their background and then talk about some things they've seen in schools and then some areas that they feel they could help schools do if they want to use them as consultant. And so we feel very proud of the consultants. It's a variety of areas that we have consultants, and they're all experienced people with whom we've worked for several years in some cases, and they're very much available to work with schools in the consulting.
So we only have about 5 more minutes, and you can look at our other services that we provide, awards and recognition. We do Students of the Month, Institutions of the Month, accreditation with merit. Look at that. We have a great distance-based LMS program, an online learning platform that if you have schools that are interested in that. We also have an external assessment program that we have set up and established. And then lastly, academic Olympiads, where students all over the world can get together and compete against each other in a myriad of different subjects. So we kind of hit on this several different times. We're here to be school friendly. We want to build a relationship.
Can we return back to the previous one, please, slide? Okay. You can explain a little more here. Even we are hurrying our time, but it is important. Yeah.
Okay, good. Did I get everything on this page?
Yeah, page. Yeah, it is already known.
Okay. Let's see. Our external assessments. We have a very great external assessment that we've partnered with another company provide. We found that schools have run into a problem with external assessments being so expensive. And so we want to be able to provide a good quality external assessment that can give feedback to teachers so they can improve their instruction, they can improve their curriculum, and also use that data to drive school improvement. Dr. Ray, do you have anything to add on any of these services?
No, and the main thing about external assessment, it gives each school a temperature gauge about how you are grading, or the school is grading its students compared to other schools. And probably my best example is when we stamp transcripts in other countries that it's required, we had a school that brought in their transcripts to be stamped so they can be admitted to the university.
Lebanon is already involved in external assessments such as PISA, and there are other 2 more assessments.
Yes. As long as we've looked at it and we feel it's a good measure, that's fine. But as I said, this one school brought in their transcripts, and all students who were graduating had received an A+ in every subject every year of their high school. Well, come on, we've been around a long time, and we know that. So we then looked at their board scores, their SAT or ACT, and no student had achieved higher than the 25th percentile in any subject. So they all got A+, but compared to other schools, 25th percentile was the highest. So that's why the external assessment is so important.
And along with being important, another service that we provide is professional development. Because every time we go into a school, we find that teachers need more and more professional development. If you came into my school, my teachers are routinely going through professional development. So we have a quality program that can be done online, face-to-face, or it could be both of them if we wanted to. And we help teachers get certified and really learn a lot of quality programs to be able to implement right away into their school, right into their school program. Dr. Ray, do you want to talk about our focus and mission?
Yeah, our focus and mission is really what it says here. We want to help students. That's number one. That's why we're here. And we believe students will determine whether or not the school is getting getting better, excuse me. I've often said that when my children were in school, I graded the quality of the school by how my son or daughter were doing. That was just me personally. If they were doing well, it was a good school. And so that's why we have to make sure our goal is that students are improving. I just wanted to add one other thing, and I'll do it in 30 seconds. Akram asked us for some things we see in the future because of the coronavirus and some things we've learned. And I've actually written down 5 things that I think are things we really need to concentrate, especially with what our world has been through lately. The first is we've already talked about distance education. We have to understand the importance of that. The second thing we have to understand is materials. Materials are not always going to be found in the textbook. And if we go into a school and we see the teacher using a textbook, and on day 1 you do page 1, and on the last day of the school you do the last page of the textbook. That's not a good use of materials. A thing that I thought about, and maybe it's because of my background, I think we're going to have to do more emphasis on the arts, music, drama, speech, those kinds of things, because students, especially if they're locked at home, have to understand the arts. I think another thing that we need to help in schools is understand the universality of what we're doing. We don't just live in the United States or Lebanon or Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Egypt or whatever. We live in a broadening world. And if we didn't know that before, we certainly have learned that lesson now. And finally, one of the biggest issues that we're hearing here in the United States is with this stay-at-home distance education, students have lost the idea of community because they're not able to be in communities with other students. And we've got to figure out a way to make that happen. Anyway, in answer to the question we were asked, what are we seeing change in education? Those are the 5 things that I came up with as just right now, here's some things we really need to think about.
Well, we really appreciate everyone's time. I know it's been a long day for you already as you've already gone to work. We're excited that the possibility of partnering with the Lebanese organization that you represent and the Ministry of Education, and see how we can best support the schools and specifically the students in ensuring that they are getting a quality education. And I will be sending out certificates. Ms. Nawal is getting everyone's names, and we really appreciate that. And Dr. Ray and I can stay on for questions if you want to, but I know many of you, it's getting late at night there, and we wanted to just thank you and let you know that we're available at any time. I have included the PowerPoint presentation that we've done, and at the end of that, there is our email addresses, and you're welcome to email us at any time, and we'd be happy to help. And I will also include it in the chat box.
Okay, does anybody have a question you'd like us to respond.
Okay, well, we're recorded, and so we will be sending this over to Mr. Akram. And again, thank you again for your time, and keep in touch, and good luck, and stay safe and stay healthy.
And we hope we've been of some interest and help for you today. The difficult thing about doing something like this is we can't see you. And I can usually tell when I'm doing a presentation who's really listening and who really isn't, who's falling asleep. But anyway, we hope this has been helpful to you. And please know that we're available to work with you in any way. We said the other day, if when you're developing your national standards, we'd be pleased to review those with you, make suggestions where we think they're necessary. So please know that we're available to help.
Thank you again, and please stay safe during this difficult time, and good luck.